"Chris, why are you home?" Angela inquired as she entered through the garage and saw me at our kitchen table less than 10 feet away. Her body partially blocked a tall, younger man following her into our home. Angela, consistently beautiful, weighing a healthy 145 pounds with auburn hair falling over her shoulders. She always dresses professionally for work, and today in a white blouse with an extra button undone, revealing enticing cleavage between her spectacular 38D cup chest. A black linen skirt highlighted her world-class legs, and 3-inch heels perfectly shaped the cheeks of her backside. Briefly contemplating Angela's seemingly foolish question, I responded, stating that I live here. A quick flash of irritation, increasingly prevalent over the past weeks, surfaced as she inquired about the reason for my presence at home at 3:30 in the afternoon. I often jest with anyone who will listen that I loved Angela since we first met, meeting her as the administrative assistant for 4 top executives in her company. She escorted me to the senior suite for hours of meetings. Taking a chance, I asked her to dinner as she walked me back to the lobby. And the rest is history. By now, Angie's companion had maneuvered around her and stood at her side. Anticipating a smirk, I was surprised to see concern in his intelligent eyes. Clearly, things weren't going as planned. I couldn't help but question Angie about the reason for her early arrival home. An hour and a half earlier than expected. Angela and I have been inseparable since our first date. I dedicated all my energy to her and our family, establishing a successful insurance brokerage firm with the assistance of her employer. Angela achieved a bachelor's degree in 6 years, progressing from a support role to leading HR in the company's Hartford, Connecticut office. Having loved Angela unconditionally for nearly 3 decades, I faced the transformation she had undergone with determined calmness. Desiring to break her as effectively as she broke me, I gave Angie my signature crooked grin, prompting her response. "We came home early to talk with you," she said. I questioned Angie about the collective reference to we, locking eyes with her. Taking advantage of the moment to introduce himself, her companion confidently stated that he was Michael Browner, the new attorney at Kellerman Sons. Closely collaborating with Angela for the past couple of months, he extended his hand, which I ignored while maintaining eye contact with Angie. I refrained from reacting violently, opting to growl and assert that I knew exactly who and what he was. For the first time, I noticed signs of concern in my wife, as she cringed when I mentioned it. "You once threatened severe consequences for anyone who called you Angie. Why tolerate such disrespect in your own home from this individual I'm referring to as Mofo?" I pointed in his direction. Angie, habitually worried and confused, is a meticulous planner. I was certain she and Mofo had meticulously planned for every possible scenario for this conversation, with every I dotted and every T crossed. In her perception, I was already a compliant, betrayed man. A quick glance at Mofo brought a smile to my face. I was fairly certain his sphincter muscle was tightening, soon to be clenched as tightly as mine. A tumultuous situation was brewing, unlike anything Angie and her companion could envision. Taking 2 or 3 deep cleansing breaths, I endeavored to push aside the growing rage and disgust into a quiet corner of my heart. Internally, I resolved to proceed, thinking it was time to disrupt their plans once more. I suggested the idea of making 3 drinks and proposed discussing matters in the living room. Angie requested a subdued glass of wine. When turning to the other person, he appeared wary, responding to my offer. He mentioned Angela's information about my liking for bourbon and craft beer. Nodding, I confirmed as I rose from the kitchen table and headed to the family room's bar. Exiting the room, I heard immediate, urgent whispering as they moved through the kitchen to the living room. A few minutes later, I joined them. They sat together on the sofa, handing Angie her favorite Merlot and Mofo, a tulip glass of amber ale. I settled into an armchair across from them. After raising my glass in salute, I took a sip of the fiery liquid. Returning the toast, Mofo sipped his beer, studying the color and carbonation. He made a remark about the complexity of the amber ale, asking about its identity. I responded that it was Pabst Blue Ribbon. At the mention of the beer, Mofo's eyes flared with anger, and Angie, appearing confused, mentioned my previous claim that Pabst Blue Ribbon was worse than donkey urine and considered the worst beer ever made. She was midway through her comment when she saw me laughing. She expressed her frustration, stating that I was being rude and condescending during what was supposed to be a calm conversation. I responded with a smile, questioning her accusation and suggesting that we needed to kickstart our conversation properly. I anticipated learning about having a polite, uplifting, and loving discussion from my wife. Angie cringed and avoided eye contact. Angela's white-knuckled grip on her glass hinted at her growing agitation. She took a deep breath, visibly trying to compose herself. "Chris, this isn't what you think. We've been having problems for a while, and I didn't know how to talk to you about it." "Problems?" I echoed, incredulous. "The only problem I see is you bringing another man into our home." Michael, still trying to play the peacemaker, interjected. "Mr. Harrington, I understand your frustration, but this conversation would benefit from a more composed approach. We need to address the underlying issues here." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "Oh, I'd love to hear about these underlying issues. Please enlighten me." Angela hesitated, her eyes flickering towards Michael before she spoke. "You've been so absorbed in your work, Chris. It's like you don't even see me anymore." I needed someone who noticed me, who made me feel alive. The absurdity of her statement almost made me laugh. "So because I work hard to provide for us, that gives you a free pass to cheat?" "That's not what I'm saying," she snapped, her voice rising. "You don't understand." "No, I understand perfectly," I interrupted. "You're trying to justify betraying me. But there's no justification for what you've done." Michael, ever the opportunist, tried again. "Chris, relationships are complicated. It's not about assigning blame." "Spare me the psychobabble," I growled. "Angela and I have been together for almost 30 years. We've had our ups and downs, sure, but I never once thought about stepping out on her." Angela's eyes flashed with anger. "Maybe you should have. Maybe then you'd understand how I feel." There it was. The real Angela, no longer hiding behind pretense. "I understand how you feel just fine. You're selfish, Angela. You want everything: security, admiration, excitement, without any of the responsibility." "That's not fair," she whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "I did everything I could to keep us together by lying and sneaking around with this guy." I gestured towards Michael, whose smirk had faded into a tight-lipped grimace. "Chris, this isn't helping," Michael said, attempting to regain control of the conversation. "We need to move forward constructively." "Oh, I'm all about moving forward," I said with a cold smile. "Why don't we start by you moving out of my house?" Angela's tears were flowing freely now. "Chris, please don't do this. We can work this out." "Work it out? You mean like how you worked it out with Michael here?" I stood up, pacing the room to release some of the pent-up energy. "You know, I always thought we were different. Better than the couples that fell apart around us. But I guess I was wrong." Angela stood up too. Desperation etched on her face. "Chris, I love you. I never stopped loving you. This was a mistake, a terrible mistake. Please, we can fix this. I stopped pacing, turning to face her. Angela. Love isn't just a word you throw around to get what you want. It's actions. It's loyalty. It's trust. And you shattered all of that. She took a step towards me, her voice trembling. I know I did. And I am so sorry. Please, just give me a chance to make it right. For a moment, just a moment, I saw the woman I had fallen in love with all those years ago. But the memory of her betrayal was too fresh. Too raw. It's too late for that, Angela. You made your choice. Michael cleared his throat, sensing an opportunity. Perhaps a separation would give both of you time to think things over. It might be what you both need. I shot him a withering look. This isn't a business negotiation, Michael. This is my life. And I won't have you dictating terms in my own home. Angela's voice broke as she pleaded. Chris, I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose everything we've built together. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain calm. Angela, you've already lost me. Now the only question is how we go forward from here. Silence hung heavy in the air as my words sank in. Angela's shoulders sagged and she seemed to shrink before my eyes. Michael, sensing that his presence was no longer required, stepped back. I'll give you two some space. As he moved to leave, I couldn't resist one last jab. Michael, before you go, let me make something clear. You stay away from my wife and you stay away from my house. You might think you can worm your way into our lives, but you're just a passing fancy. And I don't think Angela's going to find you so appealing once the thrill wears off. He didn't respond, just nodded curtly and left the room. Angela and I stood there, the weight of everything that had been said pressing down on us. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. What happens now? I sighed, feeling the exhaustion of the confrontation settle in. Now we figure out how to untangle the mess you've made. And we start by you packing a bag and leaving for a while. Her eyes widened in shock. Leave? But where will I go? That's your problem, not mine, I replied, the coldness in my voice surprising even myself. You've got Michael, go stay with him, but you can't stay here. Angela's face crumpled, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Chris, please don't do this. I shook my head, resolute. This is the consequence of your actions, Angela. You made this bed. Now lie in it. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there. Angela's bags were packed within an hour. She moved robotically, her usually graceful demeanor replaced with a defeated slouch. I watched her from the doorway, arms crossed, as she zipped up the last suitcase. Where are you going? I asked, more out of a sense of duty than genuine curiosity. To a hotel, she mumbled, not meeting my eyes. I'll figure it out from there. Good, I said, nodding towards the door. Time to go. As she wheeled her luggage towards the front door, she paused and looked back at me. Chris, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know that I really am sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. I didn't respond, just opened the door and waited for her to leave. The moment she stepped outside, I closed it behind her, feeling a strange mix of relief and emptiness. The house felt eerily silent after she left. I stood in the living room, taking in the stillness. It had always been our home, a place filled with memories. Now it felt like a hollow shell. I grabbed my phone and dialed a number I never thought I'd need to call. Hey Tom, it's Chris. I need a lawyer. Tom, my best friend since college and now a successful attorney, was silent for a moment before responding. Chris, what happened? I found out Angela's been cheating on me. I need to get the ball rolling on a divorce. Damn, I'm sorry to hear that. I'll help you however I can. Let's meet tomorrow and discuss the details. We set a time and I hung up feeling a small sense of reassurance. Tom would know what to do. The next day I met Tom at his office. He greeted me with a firm handshake and a look of concern. "You doing okay?" "Not really, but I'll get through it." We sat down and I recounted everything that had happened. From finding Angela with Michael to her moving out, Tom listened intently, taking notes. "First things first," Tom said, leaning back in his chair. "We need to gather evidence. Do you have any proof of the affair?" "I have some texts and emails I found on her phone," I replied. "Will that be enough?" "It's a good start. We might need more, but we can discuss that later. The important thing is to document everything. Keep a record of any communication you have with her and any interaction she has with Michael." Tom's practical approach was comforting. We spent the next few hours discussing the legal process, what to expect, and how to protect myself financially. By the time I left his office, I felt more prepared for the battle ahead. That evening, as I sat alone in the house, my thoughts drifted back to the past. Angela and I had built a life together, one that now felt like a lie. I wondered how long she had been unhappy and why she hadn't come to me sooner. Was there something I could have done to prevent this? My phone buzzed, interrupting my thoughts. It was a text from Angela. "Can we talk? Please." I stared at the message for a while, unsure how to respond. Finally, I typed back, "What do you want to talk about?" A few moments later, she replied, "I need to explain. Can you meet me at the cafe tomorrow morning?" Against my better judgment, I agreed. I needed to hear her side, even if just to close this chapter for good. The next morning, I arrived at the cafe and found Angela sitting at a corner table, looking exhausted and nervous. I took a seat opposite her, waiting for her to speak. "Chris, I know I hurt you and I know I can't fix that," she began, her voice trembling. "But I need you to understand why it happened." "All right," I said, folding my arms. "Explain." Angela took a deep breath, tears welling up in her eyes. "I felt invisible, Chris. You were always working, always busy. I felt like a ghost in our own home. So you decided to find someone else?" I snapped, unable to hide my anger. "It wasn't like that," she said, shaking her head. "Michael was there and he noticed me. He listened when I needed to talk. It started as just friendship, but then you betrayed me." I finished for her. Angela nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know, and I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you, but I didn't know how to stop." I leaned back, trying to process her words. "So what now? What do you want from me?" "I want a chance to make things right," she pleaded. "I want us to go to counseling to try and fix what's broken." "Angela, it's too late for that. You've shattered my trust." She didn't have an answer, just sat there sobbing. Finally, I stood up. "I'm sorry, Angela, but goodbye." Over the next few days, I threw myself into work, trying to keep my mind off the chaos that had become my personal life. But every time I returned home to the empty house, the memories of Angela and our life together haunted me. I decided to take Tom's advice and start documenting everything, ensuring I had a solid case when it came time for the divorce proceedings. One evening, as I was sifting through old photos and messages, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Reluctantly, I answered. "Chris? It's Michael." My grip tightened on the phone. "What do you want?" "I need to talk to you." "Can we meet somewhere?" "What could you possibly have to say to me?" I spat, anger boiling over. "Please just hear me out. I'll be at the park near your office tomorrow at noon. Just give me 10 minutes. I considered hanging up, but decided it might be worth hearing what he had to say. "Fine, 10 minutes. The next day, I arrived at the park and found Michael waiting on a bench. He stood up as I approached, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Chris, thank you for meeting me," he began. "Get to the point," I said, crossing my arms. He took a deep breath. I want to apologize. I know that probably doesn't mean much to you, but I'm truly sorry for what happened. I never intended to come between you and Angela. You didn't just come between us, Michael. You destroyed my marriage. What do you expect me to do with your apology? He nodded, accepting my anger. I know I can't undo the damage I've caused, but I wanted to let you know that I've ended things with Angela. I realized that what we were doing was wrong, and it was never going to lead to anything good. Why now? I asked, skeptical. Because I saw what it was doing to her. And to you. Angela is a mess, Chris. She's not thinking clearly, and I've only made things worse. I stared at him, trying to gauge his sincerity. So what are you going to do? I'm leaving town, he said quietly. I've taken a job in another city. I thought it was the best way to give both of you some space to figure things out. Part of me wanted to punch him, to make him feel the physical pain he had caused me emotionally. But another part, a calmer part, realized that his departure might actually be a blessing. Fine, I said finally. Just stay away from us. Michael nodded and left, his figure disappearing down the path. I sat on the bench for a while, letting the anger and frustration ebb away. His leaving wouldn't fix everything, but it was a start. Back at the office, I buried myself in work, finding solace in the familiar routine. A week later, Tom called with news. Chris, we need to talk. I found something you might want to see. I met Tom at his office, where he laid out a series of documents on the table. What is this? These are financial records from Angela's accounts. It looks like she's been siphoning money into a private account for months, maybe even years. I felt a wave of betrayal wash over me. How much are we talking? Quite a bit. Enough that it could impact the divorce settlement significantly. So she's been planning this for a while, I said, more to myself than to Tom. It seems that way, but this gives us leverage. We can use this to ensure you get a fair settlement. That evening, I called Angela. We need to talk. Now. She sounded weary. Chris, I don't think now. Angela, meet me at the house. When she arrived, I laid the documents out on the kitchen table. Care to explain this? Her face went pale. Where did you get those? Does it matter? You've been planning this for a long time, haven't you? Moving money into a private account, preparing to leave me. Chris, it's not what you think, she stammered. Then what is it, Angela? Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't moved. I didn't want to leave you with nothing. I was just trying to protect myself in case things went south. In case things went south? I repeated, incredulous. You mean in case you got caught cheating? She didn't answer, just stood there with tears streaming down her face. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice cold and controlled. You're going to sign over the house to me. You're going to agree to an equitable settlement, or I'll make sure everyone knows what you've done. Your friends, your family, everyone. Chris, please, she whispered. I don't want to fight. Neither do I, Angela, but I'm not going to roll over and let you walk away with everything. She nodded, defeated. Okay, I'll do whatever you want. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings and meetings with Tom. Angela signed over the house, agreed to a fair settlement, and we began the process of finalizing the divorce. As the dust settled, I found myself alone in the house, surrounded by memories of a life that no longer existed. Weeks turned into months as the divorce process continued. And with each passing day, I began to feel more like myself again. I threw myself into work, hit the gym regularly, and even reconnected with old friends I hadn't seen in years. They provided a welcome distraction, reminding me that life went on outside the turmoil of my failed marriage. One Friday night, my buddy Dave suggested we hit a local bar for drinks. "Come on, man," he said. "You need to get out and have some fun. Forget about Angela for a while." Reluctantly, I agreed. The bar was bustling with energy. A mix of laughter, clinking glasses, and live music. It was a stark contrast to the quiet, tense atmosphere of my house. Dave ordered us a couple of beers, and we settled into a booth near the stage. "So how are you really holding up?" Dave asked, his concern evident. "I'm managing," I replied. "It's been rough, but I'm starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel." "Good to hear. You deserve better, Chris. Angela never appreciated you." I nodded, taking a sip of my beer. "Yeah, well, it's over now. Time to move on." Just as I said that, the band started playing a familiar tune, and the crowd erupted in cheers. A woman's laughter caught my attention, and I turned to see a group of women at a nearby table. One of them, a tall brunette with striking blue eyes, glanced my way and smiled. I smiled back, feeling a flutter of excitement I hadn't felt in a long time. Dave noticed and nudged me. "Hey, looks like someone's interested, maybe," I said, trying to play it cool. As the night wore on, I found myself glancing at her table more and more. Eventually, she caught my eye again and made her way over to our booth. "Hi, I'm Rachel," she said, her smile lighting up the room. "Mind if I join you?" "Not at all," I replied, scooting over to make room. "I'm Chris, and this is Dave." Dave gave me a knowing look and then turned his attention to the band, giving Rachel and me some space to talk. We hit it off immediately. Rachel was funny, smart, and easy to talk to. She told me about her job as a graphic designer and how she loved the creative freedom it gave her. I shared a bit about my work and the recent upheaval in my life, though I kept the details about Angela to a minimum. "So what brings you here tonight?" I asked. "Just needed a night out," she said, taking a sip of her drink. "Life's been a bit crazy lately and I needed to unwind. How about you?" "Pretty much the same," I admitted. "Trying to get back to normal after a rough few months." "Well, you seem like you're doing okay," she said, her eyes sparkling. "Want to dance?" I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Sure, why not?" Rachel took my hand and led me to the dance floor. The band was playing a lively tune and we fell into the rhythm easily. For the first time in months, I felt genuinely happy, losing myself in the music and the moment. Rachel's laughter was infectious, and I found myself laughing along with her, the weight of my recent troubles lifting with each step. After a few songs, we returned to the booth, slightly out of breath but exhilarated. Dave grinned at me, clearly pleased to see me having a good time. As the night came to a close, Rachel and I exchanged numbers. "I'd love to see you again," she said, her smile hopeful. "Me too," I replied. "How about dinner sometime?" "Sounds perfect," she said. "Call me." Over the next few weeks, Rachel and I went on several dates. Each one was better than the last, and I found myself looking forward to our time together more and more. She was a breath of fresh air, a stark contrast to the drama and deceit I had dealt with for so long. One evening, we took a walk through the park, enjoying the cool night air. Rachel slipped her hand into mine and I felt a warmth spread through me. "You know, I'm really glad I met you," she said, leaning her head on my shoulder. "Me too," I replied, squeezing her hand. "You've made these past few weeks a lot better." "I'm happy to hear that," she said, looking up at me. "I really like you, Chris. I like you too, Rachel. A lot." We stopped walking and she turned to face me, her eyes searching mine. "Do you think we have a future together?" I took a deep breath, considering her question. "I think we do." I want to take things slow. She smiled, relief and happiness evident on her face. I'd like that. Slow and steady. We continued our walk hand in hand, both of us content to take our time and enjoy the journey. As my relationship with Rachel blossomed, the divorce proceedings with Angela finally came to an end. We met in the lawyer's office to sign the final papers. Angela looked worn out, a shadow of the confident woman she once was. "I hope you're happy, Chris," she said bitterly as she signed her name on the documents. "I'm getting there," I replied, not rising to her bait. "Bye, Angela." She didn't respond, just handed the papers to her lawyer and walked out without looking back. With the divorce finalized, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was truly over, and I could move on with my life. Rachel and I continued to grow closer, and I found myself falling for her more each day. She was supportive, understanding, and brought a joy to my life that I hadn't realized I was missing. One evening, as we sat on my porch watching the sunset, Rachel turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Chris, there's something I've been meaning to ask you."
What's that?
I asked, curious. "Do you ever think about starting over, like really starting over somewhere new?" I considered her question. "I've thought about it. Why do you ask?" "Well," she said, hesitating slightly, "I've been offered a job in Seattle. It's a great opportunity, and I was wondering if you'd consider coming with me."
Seattle.
A fresh start in a new city. It was tempting, and the idea of building a new life with Rachel was even more so. "I'd be open to it," I said slowly. "It could be exactly what we need." Rachel's face lit up with excitement. "Really? You'd do that?" "For you, yes," I said, pulling her close. "I'd do anything for you." The decision was made. Over the next few months, we made plans, packed up our lives, and prepared for the move to Seattle. It was a big step, but one that felt right. With Rachel by my side, I knew I could face anything. As we drove away from the house, leaving behind the memories of the past, I glanced at Rachel, her hand resting on mine. This was a new beginning, a chance to build something beautiful together. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful. Seattle welcomed us with open arms. Rachel's new job was everything she hoped for, and I found work quickly, establishing new routines and making new friends. Our life together flourished, and each day brought new adventures and discoveries. One evening, as we stood on our balcony overlooking the city, Rachel turned to me, her eyes filled with love. "Chris, I'm so glad you took a chance on us." "Me too," I said, pulling her into a kiss. "Here's to new beginnings." Rachel and I settled into our new life in Seattle, and for a while everything felt perfect. We were happy, exploring the city, making new friends. But then one afternoon, as I was leaving work, I noticed a familiar face standing by my car. It was Angela. "What are you doing here?" I asked, a mix of confusion and anger flooding through me. "I needed to see you," she said, her eyes pleading. "Please just hear me out." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a nearby cafe. Once we were seated, she began to speak. "Chris, I've made a lot of mistakes, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I had to tell you something. It's important." I leaned back, wary. "What is it? Did you come all the way here just to talk to me?" Angela took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "What? How?" "It's yours, Chris," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "It happened before everything fell apart." I didn't realize until after we separated. My mind raced, struggling to process the information. "Are you sure?" "Yes," she whispered. "I've already had the test done." There's no doubt. I sat there stunned. Just when I thought I had left the past behind, it came crashing back in the most unexpected way. "What do you want from me, Angela?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I just thought you deserved to know. I'm not asking for anything, but I didn't want to keep this from you." The conversation left me reeling, and as I walked back to my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life had just taken another drastic turn. I decided to tell Rachel the truth, not wanting any secrets between us. That evening, I sat Rachel down and explained everything. Her reaction was a mix of shock and concern. "What are you going to do, Chris?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "I need some time to think." Rachel nodded, her support unwavering. "Whatever you decide, I'm here for you." The next few days were a blur of emotions. I met with Angela again, discussing what the future might look like. She assured me she didn't want to disrupt my life, but the reality of the situation was undeniable. As time went on, I found myself caught between two worlds. Rachel was understanding and supportive, but the situation with Angela and the baby weighed heavily on me. One night, as I was grappling with my thoughts, my phone buzzed with a message from Angela. "You need to talk. Urgent." I drove to her place, heart pounding. When I arrived, she looked pale and scared. "Chris, someone's been following me." "I think it's Michael." "What?" I exclaimed. "I thought he left town." "He did, but he's back," she said, her voice shaking. "I don't know what he wants, but I'm scared." The unexpected twist threw me off balance. Michael's return was the last thing I needed. I decided to confront him to put an end to his interference once and for all. A few days later, I found him loitering near Angela's building. "Michael, we need to talk," I said, my voice firm. He turned, a smug look on his face. "Chris, what a surprise." "Leave Angela alone," I demanded. "You've done enough damage." Michael smirked. "Or what? You'll hit me again." I stepped closer, my anger barely contained. "Just stay away. You've caused enough trouble." To my surprise, he laughed. "Oh, Chris, you have no idea what's coming." Before I could react, he walked away, leaving me with a sense of unease. The encounter with Michael was a reminder that the past wasn't as far behind me as I'd hoped. The next few weeks were tense, with Angela and I both on edge, but Rachel's unwavering support helped me navigate the chaos. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, I received a call that turned my world upside down once again. It was from the police. "Mr. Harrington, we need you to come down to the station. It's about Angela." My heart sank as I rushed to the police station. When I arrived, the officer's expression was grim. "Angela's been in an accident. It looks like it was intentional." My mind raced. "Is she okay?" "She's in critical condition," the officer said. "But we found something in her car. A note addressed to you." I took the note, hands shaking. Angela's handwriting was shaky but clear. "Chris, if you're reading this, it means something's happened to me. I'm sorry for everything. Take care of our baby." Tears filled my eyes as the weight of the situation hit me. Angela's accident. The baby. Michael's threats. Everything was crashing down at once. As I sat in the hospital waiting room, the reality of my new responsibilities settled in. Rachel arrived, her face pale with worry. "Chris, I'm so sorry. What can I do?" I looked at her, grateful for her presence so much. "Just be here. I need you." The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions. Angela's condition stabilized, but she had a long road to recovery. I focused on practicalities, visiting Angela in the hospital, consulting with doctors, and preparing for the baby's arrival. Rachel was a rock, helping me set up a nursery and managing our move to a bigger apartment. One evening, as Rachel and I were assembling a crib, my phone rang. It was Angela's doctor. "Mr. Harrington, Angela is awake and stable. She's asking to see you." I visited Angela the next day. She looked fragile, but her eyes held determination. "Chris, thank you for being here," she said softly. "I need to know our baby will be safe. I'll take care of everything, I promised. You just focus on getting better." Days turned into weeks. Angela's recovery was slow, but steady. One afternoon, as I was leaving the hospital, I spotted Michael in the parking lot. He was leaning against his car, watching me. "What do you want?" I demanded. Michael smirked, just keeping an eye on things. "I can't do it." "You stay away from Angela and the baby," I warned. "Relax, Chris. I'm not here to cause trouble," he said. But his tone suggested otherwise. Back at home, Rachel and I continued preparing for the baby. Besides, we installed cameras and changed locks, taking every precaution to ensure our safety. The tension was palpable, but we carried on, determined to build a safe environment for the baby. Angela's condition improved enough for her to be discharged. We arranged for home care, ensuring she had support as she continued her recovery. One evening, while visiting her, she handed me a letter. "I found this in my things. It's from Michael. Read it." I opened the letter, scanning the contents. Michael's words were chilling. He hinted at more trouble, more threats. I knew we couldn't ignore this any longer. I contacted Tom, my lawyer friend. "We need a restraining order against Michael," I explained. "He's a danger to Angela and the baby." Tom worked quickly, and within days we had the order in place. Michael was legally required to stay away. For more UN videos, visit www.on.org. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still lurking, waiting for his chance. Angela went into labor one stormy night and I rushed her to the hospital. Hours later, our son was born. The first weeks with the baby were a blur of sleepless nights and endless diapers. But Rachel and I were a team. Angela, though still recovering, was grateful for our support and the stability we provided. One night, as I was rocking the baby to sleep, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You think a restraining order will stop me? Think again." It was Michael. The threat was real and immediate. I called the police, reporting the violation of the restraining order. They assured me they'd increase patrols around our neighborhood. Days later, Michael was arrested near our home. As the months passed, life began to settle into a new rhythm. The baby, whom we named Ethan, brought joy and a sense of purpose. But Rachel and I decided it was time to focus on something else to bring a sense of normalcy back into our lives. One weekend, Rachel suggested we take a trip. "Let's go camping," she said, her eyes lighting up with excitement. "Get away from everything for a while." It sounded perfect. We packed our gear and drove to a secluded spot in the mountains, far from the city and its complications. The fresh air and serene environment were a welcome change. Setting up camp, we fell into an easy rhythm, pitching the tent, gathering firewood, and preparing dinner over an open flame. As the sun set, we sat by the fire, sharing stories and laughing, the tension of the past year melting away. The next day, we hiked through the trails, marveling at the beauty of the forest. We stumbled upon a hidden waterfall, and without hesitation, we jumped into the cool, refreshing water. Once on a hike, Rachel suggested opening her own business. She believed in its success thanks to our analytical thinking. I supported this idea. The camping trip rejuvenated us. We returned home with a renewed sense of purpose. Rachel and I dived into planning our business, combining our skills and passions. It wasn't easy, but the excitement of creating something new kept us motivated. We decided to open a small cafe and art gallery. Rachel's eye for design transformed the space into a cozy, welcoming haven, while I handled the logistics and finances. As the months passed, life began to settle into a new rhythm. The baby, whom we named Ethan, brought joy and a sense of purpose. But Rachel and I decided it was time to focus on something else to bring a sense of normalcy back into our lives. One weekend, Rachel suggested we take a trip. "Let's go camping," she said, her eyes lighting up with excitement. Get away from everything for a while. It sounded perfect. We packed our gear and drove to a secluded spot in the mountains. Far from the city and its complications, the fresh air and serene environment were a welcome change. Setting up camp, we fell into an easy rhythm, pitching the tent, gathering firewood, and preparing dinner over an open flame. As the sun set, we sat by the fire, sharing stories and laughing, the tension of the past year melting away. The next day, we hiked through the trails, marveling at the beauty of the forest. We stumbled upon a hidden waterfall, and without hesitation, we jumped into the cool, refreshing water. The camping trip rejuvenated us. We returned home with a renewed sense of purpose. Rachel and I dived into planning our business, combining our skills and passions. It wasn't easy, but the excitement of creating something new kept us motivated. We decided to open a small cafe and art gallery. Rachel's eye for design transformed the space into a cozy, welcoming haven, while I handled the logistics and finances. The community embraced us, and our cafe quickly became a local favorite. One afternoon, as I was behind the counter, a familiar face walked in. It was Dave, my old buddy. "Hey Chris, I heard about your new venture." I couldn't wait for the invitation, so I had to come see it for myself. We caught up, and Dave's support meant the world to me. "This place is amazing," he said. "You and Rachel have done something special here." The cafe flourished, and so did our relationship. It was a busy afternoon at the cafe when an older man, dressed simply in jeans and a worn flannel shirt, walked in. He had an air of authority about him, despite his casual attire. He approached the counter, and I stepped forward to greet him. "Good afternoon, sir. What can I get for you?" He smiled slightly. "I'm not here for coffee. My name is Edward Browner. I believe you know my son, Michael." My heart skipped a beat. "Yes, I know Michael. What do you want?" Edward held up a hand. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I've come to talk, to calm the situation." We sat down at a nearby table. "I've freed Michael," he began. "I've spoken with him, and he understands he was wrong. He won't bother you or Angela again." I studied him, skeptical. "Why should I trust you?" Edward shrugged. "Well, if you don't want to, you don't have to. But I assure you our conversation was thorough." "Michael knows to stay away." I nodded slowly. "All right, Mr. Browner. I hope for your sake and ours that you're right." Edward stood up, extending his hand. "Thank you for hearing me out, Chris. After he left, I told Rachel about the encounter." "Do you think he's serious?" she asked. "I hope so," I replied. "But we'll stay vigilant." Weeks passed without any sign of Michael. Angela eventually recovered and settled in the suburbs of Seattle. I decided to limit our interactions, only seeing her when I picked up Ethan for his visits. Rachel and I focused on our life together, the cafe, and our growing family. Angela seemed to find her footing, and the last thing I heard was that she had a new boyfriend. Life moved on, and the wounds of the past began to heal. I needed to continue to work on myself and on my relationship with Rachel. And of course, take care of the child. With these thoughts, I sat on the pier looking at the Elliott Bay.